There are games this week, but we can't, in fact, say that it's game week here for Hawkeye Nation. But we're getting close, folks. Leave your comments and questions there in the chat. For the next 60, we talk Iowa football with you as we do each and every Tuesday here at the Voice of College Football with Cory Brada and your site for Iowa athletics, Iowa football this time of year, just about every day at the Hawkeye of the Storm. From the Hawkeye of the Storm, Cory, how you doing today?
I'm good, Mark. Have you turned a corner yet as it relates to preparation for the season? One of these days, I expect you to tell me that I've turned the corner and I feel like I've gotten at least, not to say that you're behind any more than anyone else is behind, but we've talked about this arms race that we're both in.
I feel as though I just don't stop. I feel as though there's really no off season. I just keep going, and it only changes the immediacy of when the content needs to be posted.
Yeah.
And it makes it more fun because it's just not this constant responding to news or then just manufacturing narratives and storylines and rankings and ratings and all those things. But actually, we will have a game concerning Iowa football in just about 10 days, and we'll be able to respond and react to that game. And I love to watch football. That's why I'm really at the heart of doing what I'm doing is I love to watch football, I guess would be number one. Number two, well, actually, that might be number two. Number one may be that I don't want to get a real job and actually work. So number two would be I love to watch football.
Oh, yeah, I understand that completely. I was just having a conversation in a fantasy football league chat here a couple hours ago, and we were trying to schedule our draft. And I said, hey, would 8 p.m. on Wednesday work? And a friend of ours that lives out on the East Coast said, that's really late. I said, 9 p.m. is late? I said, you live in Europe or something? And the response was, well, when you got to get up at 5 or 6 in the morning, it's late. I gave that up years ago. I am not a 5 or 6 in the morning guy. Now, once in a while, there are certain obligations that I take on early, but that's not a regular thing for me. I'm with you, though. Just football being back. We got a game. What is our first game Saturday? There's no early games this week, right?
No, they're all on Saturday.
They're all Saturday. Have there been games Thursday/Friday in week 0?
I cannot guarantee that there has not, but I don't believe so.
I was thinking North Carolina played like East Carolina week 0 one year, and it was a Thursday night. I could be totally wrong on that. But anyways, what's so funny? Why is that funny to you?
I don't know. I cannot guarantee that that's never happened, but
okay.
I usually remember things like that.
Yeah, your mind is better than mine is, Mark. So, anyways,
well, I'm more responsible for all those other teams than you are.
Yeah, that's very true. So, yeah, I mean, we're counting down the days. I had somebody ask me, when are you coming out with your record predictions? That'll be tomorrow. That'll be tomorrow. I'll actually be coming out with an official prediction tomorrow. We'll have game prediction for Utah State early next week. I'll have a preview with Coach Patterson. I'll have a preview with Brad Heinrichs of the Swarm. All that's in the hopper. And, yeah, it's going to be a busy few weeks. I'm still releasing tons of media coverage from our most recent media availability with the players and coaches. So that'll continue to trickle out over the next week and a half, all the way up to game day. And yeah, then I'll be there at Kinnick with everyone else on the 2nd for the Utah State game, which is sold out. So a lot of fun. The State Fair is behind us, and here in Iowa, at least for me, Mark, the State Fair is kind of like a primer. I mean, I love the Iowa State Fair. I'm not one to shy away from that statement and that stance. But now that it's behind us, now it's officially football season. So I am as excited as I've been. And every week I tweak how I feel about this football team just a little bit. I've maintained my overall stance on this football team from a standpoint of record and potential and floor and ceiling. But every week I kind of go, I hear a few different things here and there, and I'm like, okay, all right, I move back. The pendulum swings just a little bit each way, but I'm ready to release my predictions for the season.
So maybe an early lean, everyone. For me, if you put any stock in my predictions, and most people are probably throwing up their hands thinking, why should we put stock in your predictions? Well, go look at the records. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say good or bad. Just go look at the records. I would tend to be thinking that I'm going to take Utah State and the points. That's where I'm leaning right now.
Well, here's what can I just say this? And I've actually thought about publishing. You ever know, and this we probably should have this conversation off the record, but you ever see those videos on YouTube, Mark, that have like millions of views and they're literally the worst titles. There's no thumbnail. It's like, and usually they're old videos that just went viral. Like, you know what I'm saying? That the title isn't even an indicator of what the video is about.
Like two
Like,
squirrels were fighting kind of videos.
yeah, I guess. Or this happened to me today. Like, that's the title. And like somehow it blew up.
Yeah, I need a couple of those.
Yeah. Well, we all do, right? But I actually thought about publishing a story, a video, and maybe I won't get time to do this because I'm still fighting everything else. But I thought about publishing a video that is entitled "I Had a Dream." Because, and I just want to see what it does on my channel, because we know, you and I both know in this business, thumbnails are important, titles are important, and I just wonder what that would do. And people may laugh at that idea, but the reason why is I actually got some entertainment from it this morning. I actually did dream about Iowa football last night, and I just want to clarify this, make abundantly clear that there are so many more important things in life than football, right? We all acknowledge that, but we do have, like, as humans, we have dreams. For whatever reason, doesn't mean they're, that takes priority in our daily affairs. I had a dream last night, and I don't even know where I was, but I was with a big group of people. We were outside watching the game, and somehow Spencer Petras was starting again. And I was like, what the heck is going on here, man? He's out there, and no explanation, like nothing from the coaching staff prior to the game. Petras trots out there, and it's like another South Dakota State-esque game, and Iowa's narrowly squeaking by. And it's like, and now I'm thinking, like, he's off the roster. But I remember in this dream thinking to myself, nothing is impossible with this with this organization, with this program. They can take a guy off the roster and he's still playing on Saturday. So that was my dream last night. Some may call it a nightmare, but Cade was out for some reason and Spencer was the guy.
Yeah, the nightmare line is the obvious punchline. I was going to come in with that one myself. Beyond that, I just want to make the distinction that you would title the video, I Had a Dream, as opposed to I Have a Dream.
Yeah, I think I Had a Dream is better than I Have a Dream is almost like
that's been taken.
That has been taken, and that has more of a positive connotation,
yes.
I think, in history.
Yes.
Oh.
Hawkeyes Live. I didn't know that we were going to these places tonight, folks. We're talking about dreams and Spencer Petras back at quarterback. And when it comes to fantasy football leagues, I've often thought if I had the resources that I would want to launch a college football fantasy league.
I've thought the same thing.
And I've looked for databases out there, and I know that I'm not the first one to think of it. People have toyed with it, but I don't see anything substantial, anything concrete, anything that would tabulate all that.
ESPN has had something like that, haven't they, in the past? Like, I remember back, I'm thinking like 10, 12 years ago, I was thinking there was some form of fantasy college football. And again, it's like college hockey, like how many people are, or excuse me, not college hockey, fantasy hockey, like how many people are actually taking part in that. I do fantasy basketball based on the NBA, but
you don't think we could drum up some fantasy college football participation?
Like you said, it's all about having some sort of a format and platform and being able to be sustainable and make it equitable. I don't know I would love that. I think that'd be really fun, and the ability to draft with people and all that. I just don't know practically how it would work.
I really have no interest playing myself.
Okay.
But I have an interest in launching that and making that available for other people. Not that I wouldn't play or would refuse to play. I would play, but I could care less if I play.
I think it would need to be by conference. Like, I think it'd need to be big. You can't have 130 teams with all these different. I guess you could, but if you're drafting from every FBS team, I think it'd be better to do it based on conference where everybody's playing at the same level. Because you're going to get guys like Grayson McCall who's playing at Coastal Carolina, who puts up insane numbers. He should not be the number one player in the draft. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, there's different ways to do it. I completely understand that point. It's a valid point that you would want to keep it on the same level. And yes, guys like me would have to research the group of 5 level players far more because they're more susceptible to having those kind of crazy statistical seasons.
Yeah. Or Tanner Mordecai at SMU last year. Could you imagine? Didn't he have a game we talked about the other day where he threw 9 touchdowns?
Yes. he would win the week for you.
What would that be? He might win this. Yeah, he would definitely win the week for you. What would be the fantasy, like if you equate that to an ESPN NFL league, what would that be? Because you usually get like what, seven points per touchdown and a certain number of points per. You play fantasy football, Mark?
I have never played fantasy football.
You've never played fantasy football? Wow.
Never.
That's incredible. That's interesting. I'm surprised by that.
The only time I ever played any form of fantasy football was some guys at ESPN put together a league prior to the 2004 NFL playoffs. They wanted to extend their own little fantasy league, and then they said, we're going to play a fantasy football league just within the playoffs and Super Bowl. And therefore, you could only select, of course, players that were playing in the postseason. And the catch was that you not only wanted to select the best players, you wanted to select players on the teams that were going to make it through and play the most games. Because if you took Peyton Manning, he could have a great game in the divisional round, but lose and he's gone.
So it's not like you didn't have a weekly draft, a redraft.
No. So this was my strategy. I selected all Patriots and all Eagles because I predicted that they would go to the Super Bowl.
Did that work?
And we had like 75 people. We had like 75 people in this draft. And I remember looking at it. I was not looking at it, but there was a crowd of guys huddled around a laptop or computer, going into Super Bowl weekend, trying to figure out who was going to win this thing. And somebody out of nowhere said, who's going to win this thing? Mark's going to win it. And somebody else said, how's he going to win it? He's like 19th right now. And he said, look at his lineup. He picked all Eagles and all Patriots. They're in the Super Bowl. He's going to pick up points every play. And I vaulted from 19th to first and won the $400 or $500, whatever it was. More than that.
I think I think that's a great idea, though. Back to the college thing. I think that's fantastic. And not like you don't have enough going on already. You're trying to feed. It's one of those things. Yeah. Grab a sponsor, have a sponsor support that thing, Mark. Voice of College Football Fantasy League.
What struck me this week, Corey, and you could implement this as well, possibly for road games. You focusing on one team's a little bit different, but several times a week I have viewers, and this is very nice of them, who invite me, not specifically invite me, but ask me or tell me that I need to go to such and such game. You really need to go to the Nebraska game. You need to come out here. You need to see the atmosphere, see what it's all about. I get Iowa fans do the same thing. Number of fan bases. Well, this is possible, folks. We need a sponsor and we need a place to set up. So if we can do that, if you have any interest in me showing up to an Iowa game in particular, or if you're a fan of some other team and you just happen to be here, we just need somewhere to set up and we need a sponsor. And I would be happy to show up at your football game.
I recently had, we can talk about this off the air. I recently had somebody reach out to me in the Iowa City area that wants to do just that and have a remote broadcast from this location. But I'm with you. There's a lot that goes into that. And I just remember thinking back to AM/FM radio and what was involved in a remote. But this is such a different animal. And you're your reach is totally different than your demographic is totally different than a AM/FM station that broadcasts to a county or two. It's just a different animal. So that's definitely something I'd like to look into in the future. And like I said, I will be at the Utah State game. I probably won't be doing any work. It'll be a purely an Iowa fandom type of visit. But then we'll be doing post game coverage with Coach Patterson after the game. He'll be there as well. So back to the old grind after that. That'll be fun.
Do you plan on staying at the stadium and doing post game there?
I don't think so. I think we have our plan in place, but I don't think it involves the stadium. It's a good question. We haven't really even pursued that. That's something that could work potentially. I have not talked to Iowa about potentially being able to use the press box. I know they're open to people using the press box following games, but I just don't know what that would look like functionality wise. But I think we have a plan.
So here we are just 10 or 11 days before the opener against Utah State. I believe Iowa's a 23.5-point favorite, if I remember the line that I last saw. And I guess we should be talking football. If, in fact, there is football to talk about, is there anything out of camp? Is there anything that has grabbed your eye outside of a transfer note that we want to hit on? But besides that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one, and I haven't published a video on that yet. I'll get one out here this evening. Marshall Meeder, kicker, transfer from Central Michigan. Iowa landed him. Very late addition. They needed him. I mean, Aaron Blom right now is facing a lengthy suspension. There's no official word on that yet, which, by the way, Mark, here we are again on a Tuesday afternoon with still no news from the NCAA. I think it's disgraceful. I think it's ridiculous, the fact that we cannot get clarity and that these players and coaches cannot get clarity as to who's going to be available week one. It's just pathetic. I don't know. I mean, now I'm starting to think maybe we won't get news and these guys are just going to have to sit out for fear that they are ineligible. It's just ridiculous. They've had since May to figure all this out. Anyways, they got Marshall Meeder out of the portal. He entered the portal back in the spring. Not sure why he took so long to find a home. He was really good his freshman year. If you go back and look up at his stats, I believe he was perfect his freshman year in 2020. And I don't want to say digressed, had a rough 2021 or 2022 from a stats perspective. I think he was 5 of 11 from field goal range. But the kid's made some tough kicks, a lot of kicks over 50 yards. And he's what they needed. I mean, like, to be able to find someone like this late in the process when they're likely down their second kicker. And Alec Wick is a guy who people have talked about. You know, he kicked in high school. It's been reported. I asked LeVar Woods on media day, hey, is there anybody else practicing behind Drew Stevens? He basically told me, no, I don't know. I'm not questioning LeVar Woods' honesty, but I don't know that that's the case now. It sounds like Alec Wick had been working some behind him. And remember, Alec Wick is a walk-on receiver from the Iowa City area. But he's been reportedly dealing with some injuries this fall. So they needed somebody behind Drew Stevens. And a person may say, well, you know, normally a punter can kick. Well, they've got Tory Taylor, who's an Australian punter. That's the one thing about having an Australian punter. I'm guessing he's not real comfortable with place kicking. I don't think he probably has any background in place kicking. So they needed somebody. The fact they were able to get Meeder this late in the process is huge. And it sounds like, according to, I have not talked to Marshall, but I did see a report. Blair Sanderson did report of HawkeyeReport.com. He reported that Meeder is coming here as a walk-on. That's just, again, huge. I had heard this a couple of days ago from someone, and you know, it's one of those things you don't really want to report on until it becomes official. I know Meeder posted on his bio that he's a part of Hawkeye football, so I guess that means it's official. So I don't know how this works. Maybe you can tell me, Mark, this late in the process, is it just a matter of getting him to camp ASAP? I'm assuming he's eligible right away. I don't know the last time Iowa added somebody this late in the process. I don't know that they have since the era of the portal.
Yeah, I think he just needs to be enrolled in classes before he can hit the field and practice with the team. But besides that, I've not looked into this particular transfer. I didn't know anything about it until you mentioned it right before we came on, but this is extremely late in the process.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's awful of the NCAA to sit on a ruling for over 3 months when that ruling impacts these student athletes. And the reason they have a scholarship is to play for that particular athletic season, for this football season, and for them not to get to that and to be able to review the process, make a ruling. But they also had a similar situation in a way in terms of eligibility with 17 players, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, where it took them that long. And we're talking about players that transferred a long time ago, right after the 22 season, and they're just now denying them eligibility. And most of them claimed a hardship, like a medical situation in the family, and they were denied sometime in early August. Well, that's ridiculous.
I don't understand any of that. This almost screams Drew Ott in that situation. You probably don't remember that, Mark, but his situation
Drew Ott,
where he was hurt, and I'd have to go back and refresh my mind on the details of what happened there. But his NCAA petition for extra eligibility was denied. His career was basically, I hate to say this, but you could argue that his career was ruined by the NCAA. Dealt with an injury, waited around, held out hope for extra eligibility. The NCAA denied him. He was an NFL prospect, Mark. That dude was like, I'll go back to 2015, like start of 15. I was in the stadium. I think it was Iowa, Miami, Ohio, week 1. And I get it. It's a MAC school. I don't know that I've seen a D end as dominant as Drew Ott was in that game. And, he ended up becoming a farmer, which is fine. Good for him. As Hayden Fry would say, we need farmers. But it was just sad. And I just hope I've been very outspoken about if these kids gambled, and obviously they did, then they deserve some consequences because the rules were in place, whether you agree with the rules or not. Okay. Whether they bet on their own teams or not, the rules were in place. I believe that if you violate a rule, even if the rule is absurd and not fair, you violated the rule that you knew to be in place. You deserve discipline. But at some point, this gets ridiculous. Like you said, the fact that we've been waiting around since May. Kirk Ferentz made a point of saying the other day that Noah Shannon did not break the law. So Aaron Blum and Jack Johnson, those guys are accused of actually breaking the law. And so there's going to be harsher punishments for them. Same thing with Iowa State quarterback Hunter Deckers, who's no longer with the team. I was told several weeks ago that Aaron Blum was stepping away from the program. And I did see that Jairell Brock, Iowa State's running back, has left the program as well. But again, these other guys like Noah Shannon, and there is another name or two noteworthy people on the Iowa depth chart roster that I have not named, and I don't think have officially been named, but are people that I've heard are under investigation. It's just going to really stink, and especially if we don't get an answer by week 2, they ought to get an answer now. They ought to have an answer prior to game week. They should have had an answer a month ago, probably 2 months ago. But I just, you hate to think that they could be down a starter, 2, 3 starters, either one of these teams. Iowa State doesn't deserve it either. If they broke the law and they deserve to be suspended, then suspend them. But don't leave them wondering what's going to happen and make them make a decision and think, well, if Matt Campbell's in a situation where he says, well, if I play this D lineman and we win, we may end up having to forfeit the game later. That's not fair. So I just hope the NCAA can do something right here and make good on their obligation to give these kids a fair shake.
Yeah, it's not been a good couple of months for the NCAA because we have a situation with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan in which during Big Ten Media Days, just prior to, it was reported that there would be a 4-game suspension. And then the suspension was rescinded. And now we're understanding that suspension didn't clear the infractions committee, did not satisfy the infractions committee. However, they are still investigating. Now Michigan has taken the steps to self-impose a 3-game suspension to see whether that appeases the infractions committee, but the infractions committee has yet to rule. although there was reported the day before Big Ten Media Days that he was going to be suspended for 4 days.
And by the way, OS for Hawks in the chat, I agree with you. At the end of the day, you need to be accountable for decisions you make, period. But that's the problem. These kids are not being held accountable. They're being held in limbo. So it's like, your child violates some house rule that you have, and you tell them, well, I'm going to discipline you, but I'm going to wait several months to make sure I have all the facts. Like, that's unreasonable to think. And at this point, these kids have been held out. Again, not saying I know exactly how much Noah Shannon bet and these other guys, but these guys have been held out of team activities. They've already suffered as a result of what they did. And perhaps they deserve to miss games. That's very possible, but just give them the punishment already. Give them the discipline, and we can maybe move on from this. And as Kirk Ferentz has talked about, there probably needs to be a look at the NCAA legislation behind these rules in the first place. That's a discussion for another day. That discussion needs to be expedited by the powers that be. But in the interim, we've got to get answers to the student athletes involved. Remember, Iowa and Iowa State play week 2. So these are two programs that are at the forefront of the betting news nationally in college football. They play week 2. It would be such a shame if we don't get an answer by week 2. And all because of that, both of these, it's just unfortunate all the way around. By the way, I'll just add one more thing about Iowa State. Iowa State, we mentioned Gerald Brock. Obviously, Hunter Deckers is not with the team. They have suffered immensely, more than Iowa has, as it relates to already seen attrition due to the betting stuff. But it does sound, from what I've gathered, there is a positive vibe with the group they have. It sounds like that they feel more comfortable with depth across the board that they did a year ago. I found myself about a week ago saying Iowa should rout Iowa State. That's my thought. Like they deal with all this attrition. They were 4-8 last year. Iowa personnel wise is so much better. And yet, I just recall times in the past when I've said that, and this ends up being a really close game. And after I heard what I heard here a few days ago, that they're looking a little bit better in practice, a little bit deeper in practice than I would have guessed due to the attrition. I just, I urge fans to be cautiously optimistic about that matchup because that rivalry is so unpredictable. That's going to be a big, big game. They need to be 3-0 heading into the Penn State game. We've talked about that because if they're not, that spells trouble, but it's a dangerous, dangerous game.
Absolutely. And speaking of the NCAA, we're releasing a video that will premiere Thursday, 6 Eastern time. We had a conversation today with Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. He and Tommy Tuberville, who may ring a bell in regards to his name, former Ole Miss and Auburn coach, Texas Tech as well, Cincinnati as well. They put together a proposal to regulate NIL. So we had a conversation with Senator Joe Manchin. We're going to release that video. I went point by point in regards to the proposal and the questions I had, and really only one point of concern or disagreement there. All right, springtime. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Fantasy has college. Fantrax has college fantasy, and my draft is tonight. Oh, so there's a college fantasy deal right there. All right. Cory, did you see the wrestling suspension for Iowa for gambling?
I did not. Is that within the last hour or two? I'm assuming he's talking Iowa Hawkeye wrestling suspension. I have not heard anything official. I've been told, like I said, about Iowa State specifically, that there are players that are almost assuredly going to be suspended anyways. Like, regardless of what the NCAA says, they're going to be suspended. So I don't know if that's just rumblings about Iowa wrestling. I don't even know who is under investigation with Iowa wrestling. There hasn't been any. I don't believe there have been any players named from a legal standpoint, like football had named. Aaron Eulis, former basketball player who transferred to Nebraska, he was named because of the criminal complaint that was released by Johnson County. But I have not heard anything on wrestling.
Michigan fan Mike, the Cy-Hawk game sponsored by DraftKings. Well done.
That's pretty good, Mike. I like it.
On location interviews with fans at the Utah State game. And that's
Did some of that down. I'll be releasing some content here in the next week. Did some of that down at the State Fair. It was hot on Saturday, Mark. Extremely hot, like 95. Tomorrow the high is like one. What did I see? Like 105 or something. Actual temperature
in Iowa?
Here in central Iowa, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The humidity is, we've been in the 90s for about a week. Well, close to coming up on a week now. It'll get back down to the 80s towards the weekend, it sounds like. But it's this. Let's get this out of the way now because we don't need 100 some degrees in Kinnick on September 2nd. We've had that before.
Yeah, none of that severe heat has hit the Buckeye State. We've just sat in the mid 80s the entire summer. It's basically been 85 the whole summer.
Yeah, springtime. He just threw up another super chat. I had not heard that, so I'll check that out. That would be devastating for Iowa wrestling if Cassiope, Assad, Nelson Brands, and Siebrecht are all out. I did not hear that. I'll definitely check that out, but I had not heard that up until this point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Is Iowa wrestling still at the top of its game?
It's them and Penn State. Penn State's the alpha right now. Iowa has been close in a couple of years. They had the 1 year where with the NCAA tournament interruption due to COVID that I think they would have, Spencer Lee would have probably won a national title and the team would have probably won a national title. I think they were the best in the NCAA, but since then Penn State's kind of retaken control. Yeah, that you talk about a passionate fan base, Mark. I know I've had a lot of Iowa fans, and I'll just say this. I've had a lot of Iowa fans reach out to me in the last year. Please do more with wrestling. And I have heard those requests. I don't know exactly how we're going to address that, but I've heard those requests, and it is a passionate fan base, and there is a need and a niche there that an itch that needs scratched, if you will. So, again, all I can tell people is to stay tuned to my channel, and perhaps you'll get your wish at some point.
You mentioned 2023 predictions. You are releasing your Iowa prediction tomorrow.
Tomorrow on a podcast. Yep.
Okay.
We'll be revisiting an interview we did with Leighton Jones, center of the future, I think, for Iowa. We'll have that in the same podcast. So, yep, show will be released week 224 of the podcast. Oh, by the way, Mark, real quick, but let me just add this in there. You need to promote yourself. All right. You need to promote yourself. You're doing a lot every week, every day. I feel like when I come on this show, we have a lot of Iowa fans that just follow this show or maybe follow my channel and hop over here for our show. Allow me to take over the hosting responsibilities for a second. Mark, you need to tell people where they can find you on other platforms, because not only in addition to this channel, which is your channel, but also I post this show every week on our podcast platforms from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And I know that's been growing over recent weeks. So for people who listen to the audio podcast, just you and I, tell people where they can find your other college football content.
And that's a great point. We should hit on that each and every week, that the audio is available for those folks that just like to take a podcast with them. And that's available on Cory's platforms. We have our national channel over at the Voice of College Football. If you Google that, if you search it on YouTube as well, I think you could do either one. The Voice of College Football, our national channel, where you will find a variety of storylines, topics, rankings, ratings all season long on college football. Speaking of predictions, last night we did our Pac-12 season predictions. Tonight, in just a couple hours, we will do our ACC conference predictions, and we are marching through the Power Five with the Big Ten, I believe, the last stop later in the week. And we've got, I believe the count is 15 channels. Two of our most recent that we would like you to check out would be our Big 12 channel and also an SEC channel. I'll post those links in the chat. Tons of content, ratings, analysis, and just not from me, but a lot of great contributors like Cory. And we try to bring in the best in regards to analysis. And Oklahoma in particular, we've added some really good content here coming up this week. John Hoover, he's a really good writer, and some other folks to contribute to that particular channel.
Mark, real quick, I've said that like 3 times. Somebody just texted me and said, ask Mark about what he thinks about posting a blooper reel. I already have my opinion on this. So I want you to share your honest, unadulterated opinion on the idea of posting a video, which is basically I don't know if he means like a Facebook reel or an Instagram reel, but I mean a video of just bloopers from like outtakes from us when you and I are recording videos, or from live shows. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, so the live shows, those bloopers are there for everyone to see, whatever those are.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of recording and messing up and needing to start over and all that, yes, there have been a few times, especially when I'm a little frustrated, a little tired, whatever the case might be, where those reactions that I've had might be humorous to some.
It's every day for me, Mark.
Well, I used to put the pressure on myself to cut every video start to finish without stopping.
Ugh.
And I did that every time and would just say, I can be laser focused and I don't care if it's a 3-minute video or a 20-minute video. I should be able to talk for that long and not screw up and I've just given up on that. I don't do that anymore. You will see breaks in the 10-minute videos that I do.
Oh, yeah.
But I never did that before. Never. It was always one take, full take. It wasn't necessarily one take, but it was one complete take every time.
So what do you think about that idea?
What do I think about that idea?
Posting that.
It opens us up to a lot of ridicule. I don't know.
Let me ask you, do you think it's worth our time, our resources, our energy?
No, it's not. It's
okay.
not. It seems for as interesting, funny, all that, it would be to a small number of people.
Absolutely. Let's just let the cat out of the bag. Nobody, and I say nobody, like from a vantage point of what it takes to be successful on YouTube, nobody's watching that. All right. I should say very few people are going to watch that. And unless somebody's has the heart of gold and they want to go back and somehow compile all of our bloopers, like how are we supposed to track that stuff? We don't have time to do that.
Well, again, the live bloopers are there for people to see. They're already there. They just have to be found. But our own personal recordings, before we edit and release, that would be on us.
You'd have to cut those bloopers out and add them to a file.
Would not be worth it.
Okay. All right.
Not at all. Not at all. I hate to tell it and frame it like this, and maybe this would spur people on to, kind of start a grassroots effort and help us support what we do here with Cory each and every Tuesday. But truth be known, does this really pay either one of us to do this?
Well, we appreciate the people who tune in to watch every week, and I appreciate it I know my listeners on my podcast platform appreciate this. I think I've said this before, and I'll double down on it. I think this podcast, your podcast on Tuesday afternoons, is maybe the best Iowa podcast out there. I'm sure others would disagree, but I think you for not being an Iowa guy, given your expertise with the game in general, I just enjoy listening. I listen back. I tell you that all the time. I listen back to our podcast to see how it sounds, and if I can enjoy doing that, then I would think other people would as well. And I know, like I say, it's growing. So we appreciate everybody being here, and no plans to stop now. We're 107 shows in.
And that's why this works. I think there are a number of reasons why this is successful. And one is that we can just come on here. Sure, Cory and I understand this. There are tons of podcasts out there that plan and produce and take at great lengths the preparation for their podcast. Cory and I jump on and start talking. That's basically what we do. We have about a 13-second conversation to say, Oh yeah. There was that commit a couple days ago. Okay, the tight end. Okay, let's go.
Well,
And so there's no preparation for this.
part of what I take pride in is being able to be authentic. And I think that's part of kind of being able to come on here and speak our minds. And the same thing goes for when I'm with Don Patterson on. I mean, oftentimes Don and I don't even talk after a game, and I'll be on for half hour to an hour, and he finally jumps on, and we haven't talked. And so to me, I mean, that's what I feel is great about having Don and Gary. And by the way, I talked about being down at the state fair. I was able to kind of promote a little bit for this fall and winter. And I encourage everybody. This is what I'll say. People don't realize how powerful word of mouth is. And for those that have told others, their friends about our show, You're Not My Show, Mark, and of course the podcast, the post-game podcast with Gary Close and Don Patterson, please know that I appreciate that. We appreciate it. Just keep it up, because it is very powerful. And I don't know of another platform that has anything. This is not me bragging on myself. This is me bragging on the people who I work with. I don't know of any other platform that has people like Don Patterson and Gary Close working with them for as long as, each season as they do. So any support you can provide, including word of mouth, is very much appreciated.
Absolutely. And you may not think that you have an impact and just your loyalty in watching. But hey, if you mention it to one person, that one person may mention it to one person who then may mention it to 50 people, or get on a Twitter feed with 5,000 people, or whatever the case might be. So your support is appreciated, as Cory says, regardless of how, at what degree you think you're making an impact. And again, I think this, just to continue on my thought, that this works because of what Cory just outlined. Cory's the Iowa expert. I give my perspective. I am not an Iowa football expert. I can't be. I try to watch everyone and keep track of everything, but give that Big Ten or national perspective on it. And I think between the two of us, we cover it in a unique way.
Mark, I see some questions in the chat about Cade McNamara. Can we address those? I saw OS for Hawks wanted to know if there's any current news on the soft tissue injury. From what I've been told, he's not back yet. Okay, so the plan as of last week, I know Big Ten Network was there. That's something we could talk about. I did publish some content on that last week, Mark. Big Ten Network did come to Iowa City, and it was reported that Iowa hopes to have Cade back this week, but they're going to be real careful with him. I've said it multiple times. I'm going to be coming out with my top indispensable players on this roster, which I always think is a cool piece to publish. A lot of Iowa platforms do that every year. Cade McNamara, I mean, I don't think I'm spoiling anything when I say Cade McNamara is number one. And I don't know the last time, maybe ever in the Kirk Ferentz era, that there was one player as important as Cade McNamara is to the outcome of this season. Now, do I think Iowa's season goes in the dumps if he's out? I still think they can win 7-8 games without him because of how dominant this defense was last year. Look at what they did with Spencer Petras at quarterback, and a lack of running game and a lack of offensive line play and wide receiver production. They still won 8 games, 7 games in the regular season. But if they want to be able to have a chance to compete for the West and win the West, I do think they need Cade. There's no chance that they can win a Big Ten title without Cade. I'll say that right now. Like, they're not going to Ohio State or they're not playing Ohio State or Michigan in the championship game with a real chance. And it's hard to say 3 months in advance, but I really do feel that way. He is the most indispensable player, I think, of the Kirk Ferentz era. Some may make an argument that Brad Banks was in 2002. I know Tom Kakert brought up Drew Tate, 2005. But, man, Deacon Hill may be able to come in and fill the void. I think Deacon Hill's got a really good arm. He's lost some weight, which I think he needed to do once he got here from Wisconsin. But he's never played. And Joe Labus has been hurt. He's played 1 game. Marco Lainez just got here, did not enroll early. He's never played. Tommy Pahalski is a legacy guy, but he's never played and is a walk-on. They don't return anybody, really, with experience, minus Labus, who played in 1 game. That's what's crazy about this quarterback room, and I observed that after Kids Day. It's insane, the turnover at that position. It's a position that's usually, you lose a guy or two, usually a guy every year, because somebody wants to go somewhere else with a chance to start. But when's the last time we could say we've lost Petras, Padilla, and now potentially Labus out with an injury that I don't know what his future is. I have not heard much of any update on him. As of right now, he's still apparently working his way back. I wonder if we'll ever see him get another snap at Iowa, because it's so hard to play catch up when you miss time. And I think Deacon Hill was perhaps ahead of him in the spring. From what I've been told, Deacon picks up things football-wise maybe a little bit quicker than Joe Labus does. I just think it's just such a unique situation. I just think Cade's health is so important. Somebody made the comment during a show with Don Patterson and I recently that, man, this quarterback room is so much better than it was last year. The QB1 is so much better than they were last year. And maybe QB2 is, but I wouldn't bank on that at all. So they've got to keep him healthy. Last I was told it was a quad strain. Somebody made the comment, I heard it was a quad tear. He's not torn anything. Right now he's dealing with a strain. It is a thing that could become worrisome if they can't get it under control. So they're going to be careful with him. But as of last week, the plan was to get him back this week, but they're going to be really careful with him. And then the question becomes, if he's ready for week 1, can you keep him healthy throughout the season? Then we dive into a discussion of, does it change how Iowa game plans? He's not the most mobile of quarterbacks. But he can scramble. He's kind of like a Jake Rudock in the fact that he's got decent feet. Iowa's had some questionable status, I guess, at right tackle. They've had some injury situations at right tackle. It sounds like Dejon Parker has improved as it relates to his injury, his knee swelling. That's what I was told earlier today. I don't know if he's back full speed yet. But like those are the storylines that I think, now that we're heading this deep into camp, that I'm following heading into game week, is not only is Cade healthy, but do they have an answer at right tackle? Is Dejon Parker healthy? If Cade is back, will he have a brace on a I guess if it's a quad, he probably wouldn't, but will it change how they game plan against Utah State? Will it change what they show against the Aggies compared to what they may show week 2? I think they need, in an ideal world, they need to have him out there and be able to toss the ball around the field and get comfortable in a game situation with a lot of different personnel. When's the last time we could say they've had a different quarterback? They've had, a guy in Eric All, who may be the second best player on offense, who's new to the program. They've got a totally new crop, minus Nico Ragaini and Deontay Vines. They basically got a totally new crop of receivers. I was thinking about this earlier, Mark. They've got five new scholarship receivers. 5. And that may not seem big to some, but that's a huge number when you think about Seth Anderson coming in, Caleb Brown coming in, and the 3 freshmen who are on scholarship plus walk-on. So it's those are my things that I'm looking for over the next week or so. But from what I've been told, Dejon Parker's doing better health-wise, and they're going to be careful with Cade. That's not breaking any news to anybody.
Cory makes his prediction on Wednesday, so check it out from the Hawkeye of the Storm, and I will follow suit, I believe, as it lines up on Friday with my Big Ten predictions. And each and every year I get older and I guess more skittish about making season predictions. I put it off and put it off and put it off and think what is best for the channels is to release those predictions months and months and months ago so that they can sit there. They have a shelf life. People will watch them all summer. But it just takes me a long time to pull the trigger on making season-long predictions.
When you have people now the Marshall Meeder thing, he's not the starting kicker, all right? But like, imagine if Aaron Blom, like, let's just for sake of this discussion, imagine if Drew Stevens were the guy that was summoned as it relates to the betting situation. And for the record, I've not been told that Drew Stevens has any involvement with the betting stuff. But imagine if it wasn't Aaron Blom and Drew Stevens. You make a prediction 3 months ago, and now he's out, and they have to add somebody on August 21st. Like, things can change with the portal and fall camp and injuries. They can change. That's why it's incredible. Is it what magazine comes out like 3 months in advance of the season? That's been what's the big magazine? I'm drawing a blank on it.
You've got Street and Smith.
Athlon, I guess is what I'm thinking of. Yeah. I just don't know how anybody can really put much stock into those. But you're right. People are interested in those things months in advance.
Yeah. And again, I will go back to the metric that I follow each and every year scanning the standings from one year to another, there are more teams that take a big rise or big fall across college football, and especially in the Power Five, than we realize. So there will most likely be big changes in the Big Ten. Where those come, I don't know. But I did release a video a few days ago where I went through what I consider to be spoiler teams, potential spoiler teams in college football. Now, I'm not talking about Ohio State beats Michigan when they're both undefeated, and therefore it knocks Michigan out of the playoffs or something like that. That's not a spoiler team. They're an elite team. Like, I'm talking about teams that have no shot. They're not going to be a factor in the championship race themselves, but could jump up. And I targeted specific games throughout the year. I targeted 2 specific teams in the Big Ten that I believe could be spoilers. Now, I'm not predicting this, folks, because as soon as I say one of them, especially, everyone's going to go crazy. But that have a potential to be a spoiler.
Yeah, are they both? Can I ask you? You're going to let me guess. Are they both from the same division?
No.
So I don't know that you would consider Illinois to be a spoiler, because I think you think that they got a chance to be in competition for this division. So I wouldn't even consider them a spoiler.
So let me rephrase that. I'm talking about knocking off a national championship contender, derailing a national championship potential season.
In other words, handing them their only loss.
Or their second loss.
So I'm assuming Illinois then.
No, I was going this route. Maryland. Maryland has 3 shots at Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State.
They do every year, right?
Yeah, they do every year. They do every year, and may have their best team since they entered the Big Ten.
And they may have the best quarterback in the conference.
Yes. So, and they've got Michigan and Penn State at home. And they played all 3 of those teams close last year.
And they get Ohio State on Peacock.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so then my Big Ten Western Division team.
It's either Illinois or Purdue.
I guess I didn't explain this correctly. It's Wisconsin. It's Wisconsin.
Okay. All right.
Because this is my thought. Even though I may pick Iowa to win the West, I think Iowa or Wisconsin has a greater potential to be a hot team that's put it together, that's gelled, and it's taken them maybe some time throughout the season. But if they can get to the Big Ten championship game, that they would have the best opportunity potentially to derail a national championship caliber season from a team in the East.
Let me just ask you something, Mark.
Yeah.
All right. Now is when I become somewhat adversarial. Not from a. This is not from an analyst standpoint. This is from kind of a fandom standpoint and a homer standpoint. I'm just curious what you've done this several times now. You keep bringing up Wisconsin, and you made the comment the other day that you think Wisconsin's probably the favorites to win this division. A couple months ago, you agreed with me that you thought Iowa was probably the favorites to win the division. What has changed? What has changed to make you think that Wisconsin's in a better position not only to win the division but to knock off a top team? Like what is different? Like, wouldn't Iowa going to Penn State be equally as big of an opportunity? And I know you're going to say, well, Wisconsin gets Ohio State at home, but I think Ohio State's maybe a little bit more talented than Penn State. And we can get into that debate, I guess, if we want. But I'm just curious, what is, somebody just needs to tell me, what is it about Wisconsin that's giving them so much confidence?
Okay. The best team doesn't always win the division, number one.
That's true.
Number two, so for example, if there was an off season a few years ago where I predicted every game in college football. I just didn't say this is going to be the record. I went through every team's season, and people, again, they didn't catch this correctly. As soon as I predicted a particular team to beat another team, they assumed, you think that they're better? You're crazy. There is something called upsets. So it doesn't mean that every team that's better wins every game.
Okay.
There's a percentage, and there was a percentage that I put on the probability of each game of the season. There will be upsets. what I'm saying about what I just stated about a spoiler is that I believe Wisconsin at its best has a higher ceiling than Iowa to be a threat to the Big Ten Eastern Division champion,
based on what?
based on having potentially more of a prolific offense.
Based on what? This is an offense.
Based on what?
Yeah, based on what? This is a totally.
Based on Iowa having a horrible offense.
Okay. But again, this is an unproven, totally different personnel for not only Wisconsin, but for Iowa. Totally different coaching staff for Wisconsin. I'm just saying, like, I get what you're saying to an extent. I get what you're saying to an extent about Iowa's offense being terrible. Wisconsin's offense was also bad last year, and they're totally different. So I'm just saying, when I hear people like you say that, we're assuming that because they made these changes that Iowa failed to make, specifically with staff and scheme, that just means they're going to be able to take advantage of it.
Okay, let me state it this way. I am more sure of the Iowa defense than any unit in the division. Maybe in the conference. In the conference, maybe. I am more sure about Iowa being great on defense.
Okay.
But again, the ceiling of Luke Fickell being a great coach,
okay,
Phil Longo being an outstanding offensive coordinator, and Tanner Mordecai being a top-notch group of 5 player at SMU. We'll see if that translates to facing Big Ten defenses, but 72 touchdown passes in the last 2 seasons. Again, gelling throughout the season, and Wisconsin is always strong along the offensive front and in the front 7 on defense, where Iowa's offensive line has not been good for a period of time.
Okay. I'll accept that. Those answers are fine to me because those are substantial. And I understand where you're coming from. You bring up Longo, you bring up Fickell, and certainly Mordecai. You've heard my vantage point as to why I think it may take a little time for it to click completely. Not only because of the change in... Go ahead.
That was the origin of my point, is that Wisconsin, if they can get to the Big Ten championship game, I think poses a bigger threat.
Okay, so you're not making a prediction about Iowa. Okay, so you're not making a prediction about Wisconsin, Ohio State regular season.
No. I'm making a prediction about Wisconsin playing in a Big Ten championship game against an Eastern Division champion.
Gotcha. Okay, that's where I misunderstood.
Being a spoiler.
That I could see. I think schematically, you're right, with the new offense, having a whole year to kind of break that in, I think you're probably right on that. They probably have a system, and by that time, personnel that, first of all, those other teams will be unfamiliar with, minus Ohio State. Ohio State's the only competitor that gets to look at Wisconsin on the field prior to the Big Ten title game. That is one advantage Wisconsin has, in addition to not having to play those other teams in the regular season. But you're right, Mark, not just winning the division, but they can win the division. If they play Michigan, Michigan will not have faced that new system. They play Penn State. Penn State will not have faced that new system. If somehow we get a total shocker and Maryland's a representative, I know people don't think that's even possible, but they don't play any, though. I don't think they play Maryland, do they?
No.
They play, Indiana and Rutgers? Indiana, Rutgers. Is that what it is?
I don't remember.
Anyways,
It must
and
be.
I like the comment from South Bend Hawkeye. Mark drank the whiskey and PSU Kool-Aid for sure. I'm glad I got some of your listeners on that horse, Mark. Anyways,
I didn't state that they are winning the Big Ten Western Division. I stated if they win the Big Ten Western Division, I see them with a higher ceiling and a bigger threat to the East champion.
So make your predictions already, because I'm going to make mine tomorrow.
My predictions are coming out Friday night for the Big Ten.
Friday night. I'm going to be
the ACCs tonight, doing my ACC predictions tonight.
Get the bell for notifications turned on, because I want to see where you have Iowa and Wisconsin. And you don't do game-by-game predictions. You're just giving overall record predictions.
Yeah, I'm not going through every game. People can guess. They'll ask me, well, if you've got them 6-3 and 9-3, that means X, Y, and Z. Okay, fine. Yes. It either does or it could happen a number of ways. Yes.
And one thing I do, just preface my picks. People will see my picks if they haven't followed my channel for they didn't follow my channel a year ago at this time. One thing that I do is, and this is confusing people, I make my season predictions and I make game-by-game predictions. That's where you and I differ. The difference, though, for me is once the season starts, as we approach each week, I may make a different pick on a weekly basis than I did preseason because things change throughout the season.
Absolutely.
I've had people get mad. You didn't predict that preseason. I'm like, well, yeah, circumstances have changed. That either the team doesn't look as good as I projected them back in August, or their starting quarterback is down. I mean, there's a number of reasons why we may make changes. The weather, the forecasted weather for the week could make me change my pick. So all those things are a factor. I'm just jumping for joy that we have football. Saturday we have football, Mark, right? Notre Dame, Navy, the midshipmen and the Fighting Irish will do battle. And
I was just going to follow up, Cory, on your point by letting people know that I made a prediction on the TCU playoff game last year. Do you know what my preseason prediction was on the TCU playoff game? I didn't have one because I didn't predict them to go to the playoff.
Well,
but you know what? They were in the playoff. So
right. Exactly.
then I
Same
made
principle.
a prediction on the game. Yes.
Right. Same principle. Yeah. Like I think last year preseason I predicted Northwestern upset Iowa. And now that looks like a stupid prediction. But I don't think the week of I predicted Northwestern beat Iowa. I didn't know Northwestern was going to be manure, and not many people did, especially after they went to Ireland and beat Nebraska week 1. People were kind of high on Northwestern, and then they proceeded to come back and lose to the Salukis and the Redhawks or whatever everyone. It was. So, anyways,
I will distort last year's predictions to say I did pick Georgia to win the national championship and beat Ohio State in the national championship game. Now, of course, that's not what happened, but they basically did.
You could argue, I was going to say, you could argue those two teams were the best teams in the country. Michigan would have a claim to that as well. I mean, Michigan obviously lost to TCU one game, but I mean, season long, you could argue they were right there with those other two.
I will take up Cory on his offer to give me the platform to promote something. For anybody that hasn't watched what we've done on the national channel, The Voice of College Football, tune in for this, because after week 1, we will post our top 25 that actually makes sense. So if you want to join us for something that may change and rattle and shake your college football mind up a little bit, join us for that. The top 25 that actually makes sense, the Sunday following the first weekend of play, full weekend of play.
I am still hoping with everything inside of me that East Carolina beats Michigan so that East Carolina can be number 1 in the country.
There are some other examples of that where somebody odd could be number 1.
They shouldn't. Well, I know, but for the most part, you're right. There's going to be other.
Clemson. That's a more reasonable one right there.
Yeah, but Michigan's a better team preseason. We see that if East Carolina goes to Michigan and wins, that's a better win than Duke going to Clemson and winning. Is Duke at Clemson?
The chances of Duke beating Clemson are much higher than East Carolina beating Michigan.
I know, but I'm saying, but that doesn't matter. If we're looking at the resume after week 1, your top 25 that actually makes sense has been based on resume. Who did what win against who?
Yeah, and Clemson could be the best win that anybody has in week 1.
Not if East Carolina beats Michigan. Sure. That's what I'm saying. You're right. Is there a better chance that Duke's number 1 week 2 than East Carolina? Yes, I acknowledge that. But I'm just saying, there's probably other examples of teams that play, Southwest Missouri, Grand Valley State, and maybe that team would somehow be number 1. I'm just saying, we brought up East Carolina and Michigan several weeks ago, and if they go to Michigan and win, they should be ranked number 1 based on the principle of your top 25 that actually makes sense.
They will be.
Who does Alabama play week 1, Mark?
They play Middle Tennessee.
Ooh. So, and then who does Georgia play?
Georgia plays Tennessee Martin.
Okay, which is FCS. So they would not qualify anyways for top 25. But Middle Tennessee would. So if Middle Tennessee beats Bama and East Carolina beats Michigan, who's number 1? Depends on what they look like, how that happens.
Yeah, it depends on the performance. It goes, who did you beat,
Let's
and then what was the performance?
make that. I want to see that. Let's really rock the college football world by having those two upsets transpire.
It doesn't matter what happens in week 1. People will be taking shots at me left and right because they don't get it.
Here's the question. Are you going to make a top 25 that it actually makes sense after week 0? And I
No.
think, well, I don't know. I think you should.
There aren't enough results to have a top 25.
Well, maybe not 20. Well, hold on a second. How many games are there?
There's only like 6 games.
Okay, so you could do a top 12. That actually makes sense. I'm serious. You should. I think that. I think you should do that, Mark. I'm serious. I think that would I think people would eat that up. Like, I don't even know. You ought to do that.
Okay.
Top 12 that actually makes sense. And that can be your launch into the season.
Yeah. And everyone else beyond that is tied for number 13 in the country.
Because they're all, yeah, exactly. That would further emphasize the fact that nobody deserves a number next to their name prior to a game.
I got on a podcast the other day. It was within my network. I'll call the guys out, Notre Dame guys. The 2 Irish brothers are going to do our Notre Dame post game. They do a great job and everything, but they had a guest on with them, and I kind of got tired of correcting him in the chat. And I noted as well, now this is not one of the corrections, this is a point of opinion. I was trying to make the statement that the poll doesn't stop at 25. The ranking goes all the way to whatever number, and I counted them out and said they've actually ranked 41 teams. What's the difference between you had 89 points and you're number 25 and you had 84 points, you're number 26? There's no difference. You should just keep listing the numbers.
Real quick, quick trivia question before we head off the air. Give me, and I know the answer to this question based purely, I think I know the answer to this question. I guess it could be up for debate, but give me who has the potential for the best win week 0? What's the best possible win on the schedule for week 0?
San Jose State over USC.
Correct. And what would be number 2?
Navy over Notre Dame.
There you go. And what would be number 3?
Probably the winner of the Ohio San Diego State game.
So you ought to start doing a top 25 that actually makes sense and do votes from your panelists. All of us, we make our ballots. So we really muddle up your top 25, and you would see like all the votes go toward, like, there's no votes for, I don't even know how that would work. No votes for anybody else besides the winners of those 2 games, because the other matchups are UTEP, Jacksonville State, UMass, New Mexico State, Ohio, San Diego State, Hawaii, Vanderbilt. Hey, Hawaii goes on the road and beats Vanderbilt for a second straight year. That's a win over an SEC opponent, Mark. They would probably be number 3. I think they deserve that over Ohio, San Diego. Or over Ohio if they beat San Diego. That'd be close, right?
Yeah, it's close.
Was La Tech good last year?
No, 3-9.
All right, so that's all I got, Mark.
I think you've sold me on that. What's going to be the harm in doing my top 12 that actually makes sense?
I think people will get a kick out of it. And it's a lot easier from a practical standpoint doing that than a blooper reel.
Oh, well, sure. And I've told you this. It's been a few years. Maybe I'll bring it back this year. I just picked a random number one week just to blow people's minds, and I did top 37. And people were like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't it make any sense? It's just a different number. So I ranked like 37 teams.
By the way, sad situation. Brian says Alex Padilla is currently listed 3rd string down at SMU. That's sad. If that's the case, I haven't looked at the depth chart, but what a sad situation for a kid who had chances here, but some people wanted to see him on the field more. I mean, I think his ceiling is probably lower than some people thought it was, but if that's the case, if he's buried on the SMU depth chart, that's a sad situation. Steve, he says, are you going to break down Utah State? LOL. It's not game week yet, Steve. We're going to wallow in our own foolish humor for one more week. We'll get back to it. We'll get it on next week. We'll either have an Iowa, or I'm going to try to schedule somebody, Mark, even rather an Iowa guy or somebody that can represent Utah State well, and we're going to break down that matchup. That'll be next Tuesday. We'll be in the middle of game week. It'll be fun.
I definitely have a guy for sure if you can't come up with anyone else for Utah State.
You have a Utah State guy?
I have a group of 5 guy that knows everything about the group of 5.
Okay. Bring him on. Bring him on. That's great.
All right,
I don't have
folks,
anybody.
make it on back next Tuesday here at the Voice of College Football for our Iowa show with Cory. And of course, Cory's Iowa 2023 prediction to be released on Wednesday from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So get on over there, check out Cory's pick, and then we will do the entire Big Ten on Friday. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week.